Tristan Scott, nice to meet you, bro.
Thanks for having me, man.
So tell the world what you just did to my house. You just basically ran all your crazy meters and found out that me and my wife are barbecuing ourselves every night when we go to sleep.
Yeah, we did a little EMF testing. So I had a radio frequency meter that is testing the power density of radio frequency EMFs. We had a multimeter to specifically look at AC body voltage, which is the electric fields from your electrical power inducing an AC voltage on your body, which to me is a great way to test how high of EMF exposure from the power frequencies you're getting.
Yeah.
And then we looked at some magnetic field stuff as well. But for you, we honed in on the bedrooms, which I think is most important because especially someone like yourself, you're not working at home. You're pretty much coming home, lounging and then going to bed, right?
Eating and sleeping and is basically what I do at home.
Yeah. So the sleep sanctuary for me is most important because you can not avoid EMF exposure at all. You definitely have less control during the day when you need to get work done. But if you can go home and get a restorative night of sleep, that's when you're going through cell repair. That's when you're mitigating the damage that you just incurred throughout the whole day. So if you're going home and sleeping in a super hot bedroom in regards to EMFs and you're looking at a blue lit screen right before bed, you're really not going to sleep as well. So you might be getting the numbers in terms of hours, but you're not getting the quality. And that's why we're seeing some of these chronic diseases younger and younger. So what we did was we measured the RFs in specific areas and we found out that the cameras you have for your children's bedroom, the baby monitor, especially in your bedroom, was a super high source of radio frequencies. I was actually shocked because unlike a cell phone, which is very pulse, like every 8 to 10 seconds, let's say, it hits this peak.
Right.
That baby monitor in your room seemed to be almost consistent and it was right on your wife's nightstand. So it was at like 100,000 microwatts per meter squared, which is very, very high.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the power density of a, outgoing cell phone transmission, like constantly.
Right here.
And
It's going from 75, jumping from 48,000 to 87,000.
That was on the bed.
112,000.
That was on the bed like a foot away.
That was a couple feet away from the baby monitor.
So that's a problem because that's what you're sleeping next to.
Oh, look, 403,000.
Yeah.
That was right next to the baby monitor.
Yeah. And that's what you're sleeping next to pretty much all night long. So we can get into why that's a problem, but we did our best to mitigate that. And what I was preaching earlier is that really distance is your best friend because electromagnetic waves and fields have inverse square law. So if you put a 2x or a 3x distance between you and the source, you'll actually 2 square, which is 4, 3 square, which is 9, reduce the intensity of that field. So even putting a foot, even putting a few inches away from the source, like your phone, like that baby monitor, like your Wi-Fi router, can make a tremendous difference. So what did we agree on? We agreed you should put the baby monitor across the room.
Other side of the room, yeah. And then we're also
phones on airplane mode.
Phones on airplane mode, but you have to turn it. It tricks you. You can't just turn on airplane mode. It doesn't do shit. You got to turn off your Wi-Fi and then you got to go into the settings and turn off your Bluetooth to make the difference.
You got to make sure that when you press airplane mode, they all go off and they have that strike through on the settings shortcut. Because if they just go from like blue to white, they're not actually off, which I don't even know why Apple does that. It's insane. But that's one. Or you just keep the phones out of the bedroom, charging in the other room. So that's the radio frequency realm. We also experimented with putting tinfoil and a Faraday beanie on your Wi-Fi router. Agreed that you probably, since your kids' bedrooms are closer to the Wi-Fi router, you can get like a $30 Faraday bag. If you don't want to turn the Wi-Fi off at night, which is best case solution because you have cameras for baby monitoring or security cameras, you can buy a Faraday bag, which will reduce it like 70 to 85, 90%. To me is a lot, is a great in-between low-hanging fruit.
I think we got to get, I think we're going to upgrade to hardwired security cameras instead of those Wi-Fi ones. I think that would make probably a huge difference, as well as that Faraday bag. And then also definitely figuring out a way to turn off the breaker panel that connects to our bedroom and just use, we found like in my bathroom, we can plug everything into my bathroom, wire it into the bed and, just move it into the bedroom shit that we actually need, and it still reduces it by like, what was it, like 10,000 or something?
Yeah, so what we were measuring there was, as I said, the body voltage. So that's the electric field inducing a voltage on your body, and your body's like semiconductive, so that's why that happens. It's a great way to get an idea of the EMFs from the power frequencies, from the electrical power in your sleep environment. So what we did was we measured it before and after turning the power off. So you were between 2,000, 3,000 millivolts on your bed, 2 to 3 volts AC. Again, this number in nature should be 0. There's no AC voltage in nature. So you want it as close to 0 as possible. I think my bedroom is like 100 millivolts, 0.1 volts. It's hard to sometimes get below that unless literally all the circuits in your house
and you're
off.
in Wyoming.
Yeah, but again, I think what we talked about here is, for me, that stuff is important. What's external, like, yeah, if there's a cell tower nearby, 5G tower, if there's a substation, transmission lines really close by, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But the immediate air environment, what you have with your own technology, is more important almost 99% of the time, because it's just that much closer. So we turned the circuit breaker off to your bedroom, and you went from 2 to 3 volts to 0.25 volts on your bed. So it's a 10x reduction in the amount of AC voltage being induced on your body, and that's just by flipping the breaker off. So,
and what does that actually do to the body, though, when all that AC voltage is running through? Do we know?
We don't know.
We have no clue.
We know, we have studies just talking about,
maybe it makes you live longer.
Yeah, it could, if you harnessed it correctly, potentially. No, the problem is that's
Hold
pretty
crystals, and
it's high power stuff. That's 60 volts, 60 hertz and pretty high voltage. Your body's operating on very small scale in terms of the intensity of the fields, the intensity of the currents that are running through it, the intensity of the voltage. So to give you an indication, the voltage, which is a proton gradient across your mitochondrial membrane, is around 150 millivolts. So it's pretty small in comparison to what we have, powering our lives today. And although that does sum up, because you have trillions of mitochondria in your body, that's debatably what being alive means, is that collective voltage across all your mitochondria and all your cells is like 30 trillion volts. But that's, divided across every single mitochondrial membrane. And that's why this is also fascinating, because people might already be listening to this like, what are they talking about? We're talking about how your electromagnetic environment is affecting your biology, affecting your health. And there are a lot of studies out there since, across the whole 20th century, showing potential biological effects that are negative, and they span a swath of different end side effects. But it comes down to really like oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, and the most like electromagnetic, active, energetic areas of our biology being compromised. And it just happens to coincide with this proliferation of chronic disease and chronic fatigue, and people are maybe not considering this as a large reason for that. And I would say that would be a bit ignorant. And I want to, bring more attention to this topic. But the problem is, it's very inconvenient.
Very,
very, very inconvenient for people to have another toxin to deal with. And one that, guess what? They really can't do anything about, and they probably have the least consent to overall, and is what's powering our lives.
It's also the one that's the least obvious.
It's invisible.
It's invisible. It's so easy to forget about.
Intangible, invisible, unless you are an engineer or a physicist or took high level like physics in high school, you probably didn't even know what an electromagnetic field is. And that's kind of why this all gets buried into the conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, woo-woo subject. Yeah. But in reality, it's pure science. It's pure physics.
And what are these lights you brought here?
I brought some portable incandescent lights because I wasn't satisfied with the lighting environment. I do that when I travel. It's great because incandescent lights, my opinion, healthiest lights.
Obama banned those, right?
Yeah, they've been on the chopping block for a while now. So they're banned from manufacturing in the United States. There's a 45 lumen per watt efficiency standard by the Department of Energy. So that is measuring the amount of brightness versus the amount of power that's required to power the bulbs. The
Department of Energy.
Yeah, and that's
the same company that was renamed 3 times after it was originally called the Manhattan Project.
Sure, yeah.
The company that made the fucking atomic bomb.
Department of Energy. Yeah. Okay,
that's crazy.
I didn't know that. But the problem is they have a standard that is completely ignorant of the fact that infrared light is vitally important for our biology and our health and all life on this planet. Sunlight is 50 to 55% infrared light from an energy perspective, 70% infrared light from a photons per second perspective. And when we switch to LEDs, that goes to 0. When we're inside behind energy efficient glass, a lot of that gets filtered out. So what I like to do with incandescence, and Steve is pulling up some nice spectrums here.
Yeah, this is what you were showing me at the house a minute ago.
Yeah, we measured it with the spectrometer. It's rich in long wavelength, low energy light that is very, very beneficial for our biology. It does things like stimulates melatonin production in the mitochondria to actually balance the oxidative response from higher energy wavelengths, such as blue, violet, and UV. And we're deficient in infrared light. So the incandescents put that back. So I'm a much bigger fan of incandescent infrared maxing as opposed to blocking blue light during the day.
Yeah.
And
so you were just at my house and you gave me a new incandescent bulb for one of my lamps, and when you first scanned the lamp with the LED bulb, it looked exactly like the one on the left with that huge blue spike. Then when he did it with the incandescent bulb, it looked exactly like the one on the right. And we went outside in the sunlight, it looked more like the incandescent chart on the right.
Well, it looked like the one on the left here that's showing the sunlight, which is full spectrum. So you get a lot of, violet, you get ultraviolet, you get everything. You get everything from ultraviolet to infrared. And these spectrometer images don't even capture most of the infrared spectrum. The infrared spectrum goes from like 750 nanometers to tens of micrometers. Like it's very vast, and the visible spectrum is very narrow. It's like 300 nanometers. So the majority of what you're taking in from sunlight is infrared. There you go.
Steve, if we lit our studio with these incandescent lights, what would be the downside?
It would cost more money.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've lit tons of studios. It just takes like thousands of watts. Like, so if I were to use, for the key light back there, I'd probably use a 2K or a couple 1Ks, like minimum. I'd probably do probably a 2K or maybe 4,000
And they get really
watts.
hot, right?
Yeah, that is the infrared light. It's not as great down here in Florida, but in Wyoming, when it's too cold for me to work outside or it's like snowing or something, I have a 250 watt chicken lamp, which is just a 250 watt incandescent bulb next to my indoor work setup, and I just blast that on me all day long. It makes such a difference.
Really?
Yeah, and you want to talk about red light therapy. Well, we were talking that a little bit about your house, the red LEDs and the red light panels. Those are great, sure, photobiomodulation, but they're like 2 wavelengths or 3 maybe, whereas the sun is all of the wavelengths in the visible, so many wavelengths in the infrared. So I'm a big fan of broad spectrum light. And
Jack was in here. He was like, "You guys are f***ing up. You need to take the roof off this building, open up that wall. You guys are f***ing blowing it."
You could just open the windows.
There's no windows in here.
Oh,
we're in a spaceship. Have you noticed?
Yeah, I did notice. It's kind of tripping me out.
I tried the best I could. We have full spectrum cinema LED.
You know
lights.
what I like here? That we're not being assaulted with some like high powered LED or fluorescent light.
Just that light, pretty much.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. Like I think this is much better, and it won't be as draining as being blasted with those typical bright lights you have in like a studio setup. But yeah, that's the trade-off, and it's crazy because it's all about energy efficiency when that energy that's invisible and therefore contributing nothing to brightness, which is driving those standards, is so important for our health. And those standards, the DOE is going to 120 lumens per watt in 2028 unless the new administration changes changes that. So I would say
the DOE is going to 120 lumens per watt. What does that mean in English?
it means it's the standards for efficiency are tripling and how stringent they are by 2028. So even current solutions that just get by, like warmer LEDs, or there's a optics engineer who I'm great friends with who's done a lot of this research on infrared named Scott Zimmerman. He has a company that does a hybrid LED and infrared bulb that will no longer be legal because they have tripled the standard. So even the current LEDs are not efficient enough. So what does that mean?
This episode is brought to you by Square, the all-in-one point-of-sale payment and inventory system. If people have to interact with your business, Square makes it happen. Whether you're running a cafe, a salon, or selling UFOs to people on the street, Square is simple, easy, and takes the headache out of the business. Who doesn't love Square? Everyone uses it, from small mom and pop food trucks to big legitimate businesses. Even jewelry stores use Square. I love it because you can use your credit card, your debit card, your Apple Pay, whatever it is. It's simple, user-friendly, and super easy to interact with, whether you're the vendor or the customer. They started as card readers that plugged into your phone, but now you just tap to pay. That makes it super flexible with how businesses choose to operate. And of course, Square includes all the tools to manage and monitor your business too. You can even set up an online store if you're selling digital products. Square takes all major credit cards, including Apple and Google. I'm telling you, it's super simple. Square keeps up so you don't have to slow down. Get everything you need to run and grow your business without any long-term commitments. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/Danny. That's SQUARE.com/go/Danny. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
What are the most, bright and most efficient wavelengths? The high energy blue, violet, green. So that there's going to be more of those wavelengths and less of the lower energy, longer wavelengths to balance that. So it's just going to be more distorted, more unbalanced, and worse for our health.
Can you search for something about the Department of Energy with light bulbs and wattage output mandates? Find something about that, because that's fascinating that they would be putting this stuff into place. U.S. Department of Energy finalized new energy efficiency standards for general service lamps, which include common residential and commercial light bulbs, take effect in July 2028. Wow. For newly produced bulbs, the standards will require bulbs to produce more than 120 lumens, but you were fucking spot on, bro, up to the current standard of 45 lumens per watt. These updated standards are expected to save American families $1.6 billion annually on household energy costs and reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions over 30 years. The DOE projects these standards will save Americans more than $27 billion on utility bills and cut 70 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Holy shit.
But that's nonsense, because guess what happened in the last 20 years? We have so much more light at night. So even though we've switched from incandescents to LEDs, yes, they are more efficient, we're using just way more lights. So we're pretty much like just net neutral in terms of we haven't really saved any energy. We haven't saved any money. We just have more efficient lights and we use more lights like throughout the day. Whereas if we switch back to incandescents, and again, who needs that many lights on during the day? You shouldn't really. Let's get more, natural light from the outdoors. And then at nighttime, you just have some low powered incandescents. It's really such a narrative spin, and of course the entire energy efficiency greenhouse gas situation is it's a giant ploy to just move to this like higher efficiency, smarter life, but it's at such a cost.
So the Department of Energy used to be called the Atomic Energy Commission, and before that it was called the Manhattan Project.
I didn't know that.
This is the same people who made the fucking thermonuclear bomb, bro.
Well, it's not the same people. It's like 7 years ago, right?
Well, it's the same organization.
Same corruption. I mean, every three-letter agency, we can talk about that. It's the FCC. It's all the same.
So this is like, okay. I'm trying to see if I can play the devil's advocate here and see like what would be the downside.
The devil's advocate, sorry to interrupt. I asked a coworker in San Francisco.
Yeah.
He said their price per kilowatt hour is 45 cents. That's insane.
For these.
For electricity, they're paying 45 cents a kilowatt hour. So I don't know if you ever looked at your electricity bill.
I have no idea
You're
what that
probably
means.
paying 10 to 15 cents a kilowatt hour, which is like a reasonable amount. So they're basically paying like 3x what you're paying in electricity. So to put incandescents in their house is going to cost a lot more money. Again, if they have their lights on all the time, like 45 cents.
Why are they paying 45 cents?
Because the utility companies and
in San Francisco,
in California are a joke. That's why. Oh. Yeah. And utility companies in general, it's this weird, public service utility for a public good, but they're quasi private companies. So it's the same thing like in Europe right now, with all the natural gas issues and the Russia-Ukraine war. The price of electricity in like Germany is similar. It's like 40 to 60 cents a kilowatt hour. So they banned incandescents a long time ago, and that's all about energy efficiency. But it's not practical, and that's where the whole energy generation and energy consumption conversation is so important for society. But we should not be compromising, because no one is acknowledging how important light is for our health. And if we just spent more time outside or got more outside light indoors, then we wouldn't even have to worry about how efficient our lights actually are. And at what cost? $1.6 billion. Okay, how many people have chronic disease, and how much does that cost?
Right. Way more than that. So what is the lowest hanging, most obvious thing that these lights are doing to us that we know of, that's been like studied or is being investigated or has been written about, whatever, or that interested you originally?
The good or the bad lights?
The bad lights.
lights?
Yeah. What is like those? So if they do implement those lights, with the highest, most energy efficient blue lights possibly ever created by human beings, and we're not allowed to use these kind of lights, what would happen to the human body?
We would just have more oxidative stress, more mitochondrial dysfunction, which leads to pretty much all chronic diseases, because it's unbalanced. Like I said, the higher energy wavelengths are higher energy, so they come at a cost at the cellular level. So blue light is blue light's vitally important for our biology. We go outside in the morning. Blue light is what wakes us up. Yeah. It stimulates cortisol production, suppresses melatonin in the moment, and it provides a more dopaminergic response, like go and do stuff, seize the day, hunt, gather food, etc. So it's very important. But all of that, and then the violet, ultraviolet, which is also extremely important for our biology, but it happens to also have this oxidative response. The red and the infrared, longer wavelengths, penetrate deep into our cells. They stimulate melatonin production, which is the master antioxidant, and it cleans up all of the free radicals and a lot of the oxidative stress that's being occurred from the higher energy wavelengths. And melatonin even, upregulates glutathione and other antioxidants. It's a miracle. I mean, it's agreed upon pretty much that melatonin's like anti-cancer. But now what like Scott Zimmerman and these researchers found, it's not just about what you're producing at night from a melatonin perspective. It's about what you're producing during the day from exposure to mostly near infrared light. And when you're inside all day, you're getting no infrared light.
Is it true that when in the morning, when you're outside during the sunrise, I guess there's like a couple hours in the morning before the UVB light kicks in, where you're getting that red light from the sunrise produces that the melanopsin, is that right? Which also produces melatonin. That automatically with our body, with the circadian rhythm, when you get that light in your eyes in the morning, it knows 12 hours later, you're going to start putting you to sleep.
Yeah. So light is the main input signal to set our circadian rhythms. Yeah. And out of all the light, blue light is the main Zeitgeber or time giver. So blue light is the main clock signal for our bodies. And that's because of melanopsin. That's because of the photoreceptors, how they've been designed. And that's why it's so important. But
so would it work if I just woke up at 6 a.m. and just put my phone in my face?
that would wake you up, but because it's so stressful and not balanced.
Yeah.
So that's the cost here. It's an unbalanced spectrum. So you never get blue without red and infrared. You never get UV without red and infrared. And they've done studies in isolation looking at just blue light, and it damages the mitochondria in the retina.
Wow.
They die off at a far higher rate. The oxidative stress, free radical production skyrockets. And then they've also done it with red light as well, and that has actually a positive effect. So you never get one without the other in nature, and that's all we need to do. And that's why like incandescents are great, because they're adding back in infrared to the indoors.
That's a crazy thing that I've noticed and read about over the last couple of years, is how that red light therapy, those light panels, can actually reverse poor eyesight and regenerate visual neurons.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And if we got outside, and you can do that too. And it's just the whole indoor environment being toxic from a light perspective, EMF perspective, and just spatial perspective. Like our eyes, you could say that eyes are kind of the most prevalent health issue in the world today because of modern technology. I mean, in East Asia, they have like 90% rates of myopia for young kids. And that's 90. That's insane. And it's because we're indoors all day looking at devices 6 to 12 inches in front of us that simultaneously have a lot of blue light and no red and infrared.
Right.
So that's the cost, really. And then there's a flicker component as well to LEDs. So that's an underrated stressor to me, but pretty much all LEDs are flickering at a certain frequency. I would say overhead lighting, the flicker is not as bad as from your phone screen. Phones are above and beyond the worst.
Right.
So if you've ever wondered why staring at your phone is way worse than staring at your MacBook, it's because of the flicker. It's not just because of the blue light, because the frequency they use the reason why it flickers is because that's what's used to control brightness. So they use a electronics control mechanism called pulse width modulation, and that controls the brightness. So instead of just like lowering the amount of current they're pushing through the diode, the light emitting diode, instead they turn it on and then they turn it off. So that has a more consistent output of like color, especially at lower brightness, and just a higher precision for control. So instead of literally the dimmer switch just turning it down in terms of current like you would with normal things, it's literally just cycling it on and off and increasing the amount of time off versus the amount of time on to get to lower brightness. And on phones, that's happening at a frequency in the hundreds of hertz range, which is just above visual perception. And it drives your brain and eyes crazy. And this is known side effects. You can look up like electrical engineering standards even agree. Flickering LEDs causes eye strain, headaches, migraines, aggravates symptoms in ASD, autism children, panic attacks, anxiety. And guess what? Every single phone display and pretty much every LED light is powered or is controlled with pulse width modulation.
How did you learn about all this shit?
So I'm an electrical engineer by degree who became obsessed with health because I had one too many concussions.
How'd you get concussions?
I played soccer in college, so most of them from that. And then last one that put me over the edge, I didn't even know I was concussed, just like passed out and hit my head, did everything wrong in that acute recovery phase. So went down the rabbit hole. And I was fascinated with health. And, you know, my mom's from Austria. I grew up in the outdoors. Like I love the outdoors. And yeah, just kept going down these rabbit holes and realized quickly that we're just so disconnected from nature, and that's a large reason why we're so unhealthy, and that there's a big electromagnetic, piece to this conversation. Like I started with the food, I started with the plastics. I wrote a book half about regenerative agriculture and food, and then I just was like, hey, these people online are talking about like EMFs and grounding and stuff, and honestly, they don't know what they're talking about because they've never clearly taken a physics course.
Right.
And I see these like pendants and neutralizers.
Oh my God, dude. If I had $1 for every fucking influencer I talked about grounding, on my Instagram feed, I'd have
it's
$20.
blown up now, and now it's blown up now. And for me, I was like, wow, I have an opportunity here. I'm an electrical engineer to actually bridge these worlds of electromagnetism and biology, which are so siloed because all the electrical engineers and physicists are just in their lane, and then the biology doctors, practitioners are in their lane. They don't cross at all.
No.
And yeah, I just got really fascinated, started reading a lot of this research on these topics, and just it made sense as to why on my own healing journey, the more time I spent outdoors, the more time I spent in an environment closer to what exists in nature, the better I felt. And then, 14 months ago, I had Anjan on my podcast, and he's, talked about daylight. I was like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. And then joined him immediately because I was like, this is the last piece. We could eat cleaner food. We could wear, natural fiber clothing. We can get outdoors more. But to me, technology is the most pervasive environmental toxin that exists, and we have literally no alternative. So that's what we're trying to fix at Daylight.
Credit card debt has reached an all-time high, and it's trapping Americans, making it harder to pay off. But there's one company that has become the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's American Financing. Prices for the last few years have been and continue to be high, and most people unfortunately have to reach for credit cards to cover bills and expenses. But this is not sustainable. American Financing is helping homeowners pay off their high-interest debt by using the equity in their home. American Financing is a family-owned mortgage lender that's been growing like crazy, and it's licensed in all 50 states. Their mortgage consultants are salary-based, so there's no incentive to put you in a loan that won't work. Their customers save on average of $800 a month, and they don't charge any upfront or hidden fees. You may be able to close in as fast as 10 days and may even be able to delay the mortgage payments up to 2 months during the process, creating an extra bonus in savings up front. You can join hundreds of thousands of happy customers with meaningful savings by going to American Financing. Pretty cool if you ask me. Go to americanfinancing.net/Jones to get the best deal, or call 888-995-2440. americanfinancing.net/Jones. NMLS 182334. www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. Thank you, American Financing, for sponsoring this episode. It's linked below. Now back to the show. That's wild, dude. I mean, that's like I said, like we were talking about, like there's no one who really knows a lot about this stuff. And as far as I'm aware, there's no scientific peer-reviewed studies that have happened in regards to exposing people to these radio frequencies, these EMFs, 5G, all this stuff, right? There's that's like partially false and partially true, which pretty much means the same thing, I guess. There's been so many studies on electromagnetic fields having biological effect, like thousands. If you saw the clip from RFK talking on Rogan, said there are thousands of 5G
studies.
5G crosses the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah. Well, that study was from Alan Frey, 1975, was funded by the U.S. Navy for 15 years because guess who was interested in radar and microwaves? The military. So that's where a lot of this research in the 50s, 60s, 70s was all from the military, and they were interested. And there was some, sidebar DARPA stuff to look at like what was going on in the Russian embassy, which we can talk about. But really, he found a lot of biological effects at low power density. And it just so happened that the frequencies he was looking at are the same exact frequencies being used for telecommunications today. There's no way we would have known, but they're around 2 to 4 gigahertz. They're called microwaves. They're the same frequency as the radio, communications we use, probably just different modulation techniques because they're not transmitting data for cell phones. They're like radar equipment. And he found that it opens up the blood-brain barrier. He found that it made rats very docile. He found at a very low power density, he stopped a frog's heart completely from just exposure to.
Who was doing this?
Alan Frey. He worked for GE, and he went down this rabbit hole because some operator came to him and was like, hey man, I can hear the radar. And he's like, what are you talking about? He was like, no, I can hear the radar. Come check it out. And he could hear it too. And they realized and they figured out that it wasn't from the ears, it was a neurological response from the microwaves. And Alan Frey, and there's this whole debate, literally a microwave debate in the 70s about this stuff, especially because the Russian embassy crisis, people kind of got freaked out.
Yeah,
and then
Havana syndrome stuff.
There was a GE, another thing with ionizing radiation where TVs that GE made unfortunately had X-ray exposure by accident. So then the public became like very distrusting of technology for a little bit. And then they kind of like was a big deal. Someone wrote a book called Zapping of America, Paul Brodeur, and then it kind of just went away. Like they were like after the 70s, just swept it under the rug, and no one's connected the dots since. And now they're like, well, there's been no studies on 4G and 5G, but a lot of biological effects have been studied for the same exact frequencies for decades. And there's thousands of studies even since 1990 that are showing harmful biological effects. Thousands.
Really?
But they're mostly on rodents. A lot of them are epidemiological. It's really hard to do studies on people with electromagnetic fields. And some of the population-based studies that they've done have been, pretty damning.
Have you looked at how deep have you looked into the Havana syndrome stuff? Like the people that have these symptoms of like really bad tinnitus, their ears ringing, and like hearing voices in their heads, crazy migraines, like unbearable migraines. People that were in the embassy in Cuba and as well in Moscow that experienced this stuff.
I'm familiar with the Moscow signal and the Moscow embassy. I've read a lot about that, and that was basically it's funny. This was like a big topic during the Cold War because Russia was very much aware or like stringent on electromagnetic fields, and they had 1,000 times stricter thresholds for microwave radio frequency safety. And they, were in a Cold War, and for whatever reason, they decided to mock the U.S. and blast the embassy, the U.S. embassy in Moscow, for over 15 years. I think it was maybe even 20 years with a quote unquote low intensity. Yeah, here we go. Low intensity signal in the microwave range, 2.5 to 4 gigahertz, which is exactly, your Wi-Fi is at 2.4 gigahertz. Your phone in 5G midband is operating roughly in that area.
But these aren't, so the difference is these were directed, right? These were shooting like a gun out of some sort of a device.
No, it was just like, it was just being beamed from like a building onto the U.S. embassy.
Oh, like a big wide blanket.
Like this
beam?
wasn't like, hey, we're doing this. This was like, they never have admitted to this day that they did this.
Right.
So
we have no idea how they actually have to. Like
exactly.
It didn't necessarily. Like I would imagine that if I was like the Russian intelligence agency KGB and I knew that the CIA was right across the street, we could go in the building and we could get some sort of like crowd control device that shot fucking 5G right at the building at a certain, because it was directed at certain floors.
Yeah, I think
like
so.
There was only certain floors where people had those really bad symptoms.
Yeah. And they did some weird, like the U.S. kind of freaked out, but they couldn't tell anybody because they were like, well, it's under our safety threshold.
Yeah.
So they're in like a catch-22.
Yes.
And they started doing these side projects like Project Pandora, Project Bizarre. Project Pandora was they took a couple monkeys and tested it with like 5 microwatts per centimeter squared, which was 50% of the U.S.'s current safety threshold. And they were just trying to figure out, like, is this actually dangerous? And that's really high, by the way. That's like maybe the peak transmission of your cell phone for 1 second. They blasted these monkeys for 10 hours a day for 10 to 12 days straight. And on like the 10th, 11th, 12th day, the monkeys would straight up fall asleep, like standing up.
And not wake up?
They would just be like zombies. They were performing all these tasks, apparently. And then eventually on like the 10th, 11th, 12th day, they would just like basically be asleep, but not asleep. And then every time they did it, like they let them recover and then they would do it again. It was a shorter time. And then eventually they just stopped the studies and the monkeys like never technically recovered. But that's not, I'm going to say that's not indicative of like normal cell phone exposure.
It's way more,
But you should be pretty concerned, like in any capacity that exists. And then there was some more studies. They ran some blood work and they didn't really tell people. And eventually, people figured it out and like broke the news, and it was a big deal. But it was so inconclusive that no standards, nothing was really changed at all.
Right. And then there was also the Philadelphia experiments that were done in the US where they were shooting like frequency beams at some of the sailors that were on the ship, some of the Navy guys.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that one, but there's a lot.
A lot of crazy. The Cold War, dude, was like one of the craziest, most sci-fi dystopian periods in America, bro.
And that's where people are like, oh, there's all this like, you know, MK Ultra stuff. I'm like, this was for war. They were just trying to figure out and get the upper hand. And a lot of progress was made, but a lot of
we went to the moon.
Crazy stuff was going on. I'll say that. But what I wanted to say is there is no shortage of evidence that there's potential biological effect. It's just the context.
No shortage of evidence that there's biological effect.
I mean, there's so many studies, hundreds and hundreds of studies from that time period. Even more if you want to look at actually the Russian studies, which are way more, you know, I would say fair in terms of how they're measuring effects. Because what you're saying with like Havana syndrome, Russia acknowledged, I think it's called like asthenia, or you know what we call today hyper-electrosensitivity, that there is a repercussion from overexposure long-term to electromagnetic fields. And it's funny, two of the pioneers of technology in the early 20th century, Nikola Tesla and Marconi, the radio guy. Marconi, at the end of his life, had like 5 heart attacks in 10 years. And the dude was literally, you know, on radio transmission all day. And Tesla was always playing around with stuff. And he literally went crazy in his later years, died poor. And if you look at it from, you know, an unbiased perspective, you would say that for sure both of them had electrohypersensitivity or some sort of electromagnetic related condition, because they were just, their nervous systems and bodies were fried.
Wow. What is this this Phonegate thing, this that you emailed me about? In France, there's some sort of thing going on with phones being labeled.
Yeah, there's that. There's a lot. I would say the Phonegate is they basically tested all these phones, and the manufacturing radiation emissions, the SAR readings were not accurate. They were higher than they should have been, like 90% of the phones. So it's just a blatant lie from the tech industry. And that,
what phone specifically, do we know?
I think it was almost all major smartphones.
Okay.
But the problem is even that whole metric, specific absorption rate, how they go about that. What they're doing is they're measuring the energy, the quote unquote energy being absorbed by your body from cell phone radiation. And that I think came about in the 80s originally, and then implemented more so in the late 90s as wireless technology emerged. And it's purely based on calculations of like tissues. And you know what they do the testing on? They do the testing on a 6'2", 220-pound adult bio dummy. So there's no real testing going on in terms of it being indicative of like a real human using the product. So to me, that whole metric and that system is flawed in every which way possible that you can imagine. And if you want to get even more like upset, if you go into your settings of your phone, you can literally go under like legal and regulatory guidelines, RF exposure, and there's a very cleverly crafted statement from every smartphone, consumer electronics product device manufacturer that says like, don't hold this product on your body, like use 5 millimeters of separation to
How do I find that?
Reduce RF exposure. Go into settings.
Okay. Let's see. Let's do it right now.
And just look
settings.
up legal.
Legal. Okay. LEG. Legal and regulatory?
Yeah. And then go to RF exposure.
RF exposure. Okay.
And you can read like, to reduce exposure to RF energy, use a hands-free option such as speakerphone, headphones, and there's a much longer.
The last paragraph. To reduce exposure to RF energy, use a hands-free option such as the built-in speakerphone, headphones, or other similar accessories. Cases with metal parts may change the RF performance of the device, including its compliance with the RF exposure guidelines, in a manner that has not been tested or certified. Wow. Although this device has been tested to determine radio frequency exposure compliance in each band of operation, not all bands are available in your area. Bands are dependent on your service provider's wireless roaming networks. That's another thing I wanted to ask you about. what about the AirPod headphones, those wireless Bluetooth headphones that everyone uses? Are those super toxic?
They're 2.4 gigahertz as well. So it's the same frequency as your Wi-Fi, just below a microwave oven.
I saw a clip on Huberman's podcast where he's interviewing, I think it's a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, the Neuralink guy, right?
Is that who that was?
I think so.
No. It wasn't the guy who had Neuralink. Or no, it wasn't the guy who had the brain chip. Okay. This guy was like an actual neurosurgeon. And he was asking him about radio frequencies. And he asked the guy like what he thought about those headphones, those Apple headphones. Like, oh, it's not a big deal. He's like, they put out such a little bit, it wouldn't make a difference.
That's true. But guess where they're located?
In your head.
In your ear canal.
Right.
Zero distance. Not even zero distance. It's almost like even closer than your phone would be, right? Because it's in your ear. So it's very true that Bluetooth is low energy, low power. You know, that's the whole glamour to Bluetooth. It's like low power. It's amazing. In electrical engineering, like everyone loves Bluetooth, even though it's kind of like for connectivity and stuff, it's kind of a pain in the ass, right? Like things are always connecting, disconnecting.
Yeah.
Apple has, made it seamless because they have the hardware and the accessory. Every other Bluetooth accessory doesn't get Apple's kind of protocols. That's why they're a lot more annoying to connect, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you measure, the EMF meter like we use today on AirPods at the distance they are exposed to your head because they're zero distance. It's like the same as standing like a foot away from a microwave oven, or actually worse. So it's very much.
Really?
I would be concerned, I would say, because of the duration and the distance. It's all part of the equation here. You have the distance, you have the intensity of the field, and then the duration of the exposure. I've looked at a ton of studies. A lot of the studies have harmful effects over some duration of exposure being like chronic. So if it's just like 10 minutes or 20 minutes, that's really not what we're talking about here. We're talking about 24/7, 365. We're in a Wi-Fi bath. We never turn our phone off. It's always on our body. We have the AirPods in. It's a layer on top of a layer on top of a layer of an EMF toxic cake. And that's my issue with it. I could make the debate that says if you wear AirPods to take a phone call and your phone is on the other side of the room, that would actually maybe be better because the phone is typically the highest source of
versus
RF.
having it up to your head like that.
That is the worst. The phone up to your ear is by far the highest amount of RF radiation exposure. Wired headphones would be better. You could even say that wired headphones have some conductive material. They have a neodymium magnet that has a DC static magnetic field in them as well, which is not ideal.
So they're a little bit better, but not much.
They're better. Air tube headphones exist, but they have like the most atrocious user experience. They're horrible.
Suck. The ones you get on airplanes, right?
Yeah, they're horrible. So it's imperfect everywhere. If you, I think, are more diligent about how you use your phone, don't keep it on your body when it's on, especially next to reproductive organs or next to your head, and you want to use AirPods for a couple hours a day, like be my guest. All I'm saying is this all adds up, and we're never giving our body a break. But what we did at your house today was we optimized your sleep environment. So that's when you actually have a chance to recover, to repair your cells, to get into autophagy, to get into apoptosis, clean up the, damaged cells. And that is what we're not getting because of the blue light at night, because of the disrupted circadian rhythms, and because we have all these stressors like Wi-Fi or cell phone, high amount of electrical power, EMFs in our bedroom all the damn time.
What have you noticed as far as like a change? Can you like actually feel a change in the way you feel during the day after getting rid of all this shit where you sleep?
The opposite. I feel it when I'm back in an environment that is high EMF.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's like with everything toxic, you typically don't feel an amazing response when you cut something out, but when you add it back in, your body's like, whoa.
Yeah. So, right. So like it becomes normal, right? You're just used to that feeling better. And then when you get back into the shitty environment, you're like, oh shit.
And then conversely, when you go back to the good environment after being in a bad one,
you notice it.
Yeah. So for example, I live in central Wyoming, in a 2,000 person town. So very chill, low EMF, low stress. There's no traffic. There's barely any people. My house is hardwired. I turn the power off at night. It's great. I sleep amazing. And then our office for daylight's in San Francisco, and I go there. I was there for 2 weeks last month, and yeah, you just feel it. Like you're more on edge. You're just hyperactive, sympathetic dominant nervous system. You don't sleep as well. You're kind of just, a little fidgety. You're just stressed out. And that's what you feel, this anxious energy. And it's probably a combination of a lot of stuff. And then I go back to Wyoming for the first time, like 2 weeks later, and I walk around the block and I just took a deep breath and I was like, okay, wow. Like I actually feel like I can relax.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's this background stressors that are really just keeping us on edge. And that's so draining to our biology. It's so fatiguing for our cells to never actually fully be in a parasympathetic state and execute biological functions. We're always in fight or flight. And over time, that results in, bad outcomes at a cellular level. And it's a mitochondrial toxin is what most of these studies, there's thousands of studies, almost all of them point to oxidative stress, mitochondrial damage, and you see it because it proliferates in the most energetically rich, dense, mitochondrial dense tissues, which is your heart, your brain, and your reproductive organs. And that's where a lot of these studies and issues are at.
Another thing that I was reading, was that there was a study that was based on these EMFs and heart cancer in, I think it was mice or something. And that was, they were exposed to, were they exposed to like 5G or was it 4G, or do you know what that one was?
Yeah, it's the National Toxicology Program.
Okay.
They ran a multi-year study, spent $25 million to, there's been a lot of studies where people spend a lot of money on this. And this is a government agency coming from the, Department of Human Health and Services. And they looked at, it was 2G and 3G frequencies and modulated signals, which is, again, we can talk about what 5G actually is, but we still use a lot of those same signals. So it's very much indicative of the cell phone exposure. I think it was for a normal amount of time per day, like 10, 12 hours. And there was clear evidence of tumors in the hearts of male rats. There was some evidence of tumors in the brains and another area of the body. And that was the conclusion. And then guess what happened? Nothing. They just cut the funding and no follow-up studies. There's so many, conflicting media articles published on that.
Yeah.
And that's just one that's happened so many times. People are always like, the studies are inconclusive. But guess what's happened over the last 20 to 30 years? The telecom industry has funded so many shoddy studies. So
really?
Oh, yeah. So many. This is, I think, the worst industry where this occurs. And there's people like Dr. Henry Lai, who from University of Washington, put together these comprehensive reviews. He literally has a Google Drive of thousands of studies where he's tried to filter out. And one of the first reviews he put together, he did 350 studies, and he found, I think it was 55 to 60% showed harmful biological effects. It was kind of almost 50-50. But then when he subdivided them into who was funded independently and who was funded by industry, it was 70% of the independent studies showed harmful biological effects, and 25 to 30% funded by industry showed harmful biological effects. And then more and more people did the same thing, and they found the same conclusions. UC Berkeley in 2010 did a review of all the industry funded studies, and were like, these are inadequate. These are studies that are not even using real cell phones for their studies. They're using simulated frequencies. So it's insane and
geared to get better results, right?
Of course, because what is the worst outcome for the telecom industry? And we're talking, the OG ones like Motorola and now Verizon, AT&T, and of course the big tech, device companies, but really the telecom giants. This could really hamper, and it's happened since the 90s. That Dr. Henry Lai guy in 2006 found that radio frequency cell phone exposure causes DNA strand breaks. And then Motorola went on this smear campaign and was like, no, that's inconclusive.
What was the name of this? It was called what again?
Dr. Henry Lai, L-A-I.
Henry Lai, and then how would we find that on the internet? Just type in DNA strands.
Yeah, DNA strand break or EMF exposure.
Okay.
Summary. And the reason why you've never heard this or no one's talking about this is so many of these researchers basically got canceled. So everyone, like Alan Frey, funding pulled. There was Milton Zaret before him in the 60s was proving that EMFs cause cataracts. That was like the first known.
Cataracts?
Cataracts was the first known side effect of EMFs besides thermal, increasing the temperature of your body. And then it was actually testicular damage in the 60s as well, which they covered up. They both got canceled. Robert O. Becker, Andrew Marino, they went on 60 Minutes, or Robert O. Becker did. They got canceled. Henry Lai's research has shown that exposure to a 60 hertz magnetic field at intensities of 0.1 to 0.5 millitesla for 2 hours can cause an increase in DNA single and double strand breaks in brain cells of rats. So, okay, what would a 60 hertz magnetic field in the 0.1 to 0.5 millitesla range be equivalent to in the real world? So that's 60 hertz is power frequency. So that's what's coming out of your outlet. That's, so what's that? Like 100 milligauss. That's probably being 6 to 12 inches away from your power outlet, like pretty close, maybe even closer.
So like where I'm sleeping in my bedroom.
Yeah, you'd have to be really close to it or live very close to like high voltage transmission line. Okay. The more damning one for me is one that even goes further back, is actually that there's a statistically significant increased risk of childhood leukemia at 4 milligauss. So that's, like 100 times lower.
What is a milligauss?
A milligauss is just another measure of power flux density, which is magnetic field. So if I converted that.
So they found out that childhood leukemia rates were, how do they do that? How do they measure this?
It was epidemiological research, like correlative data, but it was reproduced. So it's actually a crazy story what happened, because there was, and it comes back to Robert O. Becker as well. So basically, the Navy was trying to build this antenna in Michigan and then Wisconsin for submarine communication. And that was called Project Sanguine. Eventually, like they renamed it 4 times because the public kept freaking out about it. Because the Navy asked Robert O. Becker and a few other scientists to review the current research on low frequency EMFs and their biological impact. And they looked at that time in the 70s at the existing research, and they concluded that there were potential harmful effects, mostly from, power line data. And yeah, there's some correlative stuff.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm distracted. And they recommended that the Navy, not proceed forward or, proceed with caution, because there was existing evidence that showed low frequency EMFs could be harmful to biology. Although the Navy's antenna they wanted to build was like thousands of times lower intensity than all the power lines and the exposure to power lines. And then the Navy kind of covered that up. They didn't tell anybody. And then they just were like, yeah, this is safe. And then Robert O. Becker went on 60 Minutes and like made this big public outcry about it, and then the public kind of was freaked out, so they boycotted it, got moved to Wisconsin, etc. And then Robert O. Becker went back to his home state of New York and started petitioning against this new power line project that was going to be built, because he thought it would be unsafe based on the distance that they were putting into it. And he started doing his own studies on rats, and they found some multi-generational issues with birth rates and health concerns in rats. And then someone from North Carolina, I think her name was Nancy Wertheimer or something, came out and it said 4 milligauss is like a threshold for statistically significant increased risk of childhood leukemia because of proximity transmission lines. Then the New York State Power Lines Project were like, we're going to fund a study. It's going to be like $20 million to disprove it. They had this whole thing. And then guess what? They came up with the same result. They actually
admitted it?
They admitted it. And then you know what they said? They said, well, it's too late. We're going to set the safety threshold to 100 milligauss because the public has already taken this safety concern. That's their problem. And then nothing happened.
Jesus Christ.
That was in the late 70s. Yeah, I think I had it in my notes somewhere here of everything that happened. Yeah, Nancy's study at only 3 milligauss is in 1979. The utility-funded study was in 1987, which confirmed her results. And then they were like, yeah, sorry, the public has accepted this risk. And then there was guys in the 90s, this guy RP Liberty, that showed more studies for 60 hertz fields proliferating cancer cells, suppressing melatonin. And then the New York Times like said that this guy made up his results, even though he like graphed one table like slightly incorrect. The results were totally fine. So a lot of every decade there has been a massive EMF debate, and nobody knows about this. Most of the literature I'm reading, I wish I could have sent you more stuff. It's all from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And then so you just have to apply that today. Well, because first off, the power transmission exposure is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. Like we still have 60 hertz.
We have the same exact power lines.
We have the same exact power. But guess what? We have
now we have 5G towers everywhere.
Yeah, but we also have way more stuff like just plugged in and powered.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have wireless technology.
We have the we have the AirPods in our ears and the Meta VR glasses on. I have a buddy who's like, he walks around all day with he's got a prescription Meta glasses and he films everything in fisheye, like connects to his phone. Like, dude, it's insane. And I wonder what those Elon Musk brain chips are doing to people. Well, I mean, not many people have them, but like, so say you were one of the medical people that got paralyzed and had to get that chip installed. I wonder how bad that thing would be, because it's like in your brain, inside the gray matter.
We just don't know. And, you know, from reading Robert Obecker's work, we know that the human body is operating at very, very low intensity, like currents and fields. So any of this exposure, even this low level exposure, and a lot of this research actually, it's not linear. It's not dose dependent. Like higher is always worse. Actually, for magnetic fields, and what really blew everyone's mind and my mind, like 3 to 4 milligauss is nothing. That's like if I'm sitting in the front passenger seat of my 4Runner, I'm getting like 2 to 4 milligauss from the alternator. Like that's like,
what I was gonna ask you that too. I was gonna say, do you have some super old car with like not a lot of electronics in it?
If you want the lowest EMF car, you should buy like a 1999 Camry or something. You know, 4-cylinder.
What's the best truck that's low EMF? Do you think?
I mean, something that's older would have less electronics in it.
The older, the better.
But basically, the alternator is actually going to generate magnetic fields. And again, I wouldn't worry about your car. I would worry about like your phone that's next to you in your lap if you're driving for a while, more so.
Right.
I mean, there's little you can do about, you're not going to go shield your alternator. They probably could figure out a way to do that. But that's, you know, I'm not a fan of Teslas, of course, because they have a tremendous amount of magnetic field exposure, plus screens everywhere, plus
those
they have
batteries
the semiconductor content is through the roof. Well, the batteries have to be converted to run an AC induction motor. And whenever you're converting power, like the alternator, like the traction inverters that are used to convert the DC battery to run the AC induction motor, tremendous amount of EMF exposure. Even solar inverters, like, you know, if you're running an off-grid homestead and you're converting DC to AC, you want to be cognizant of your inverter, because that's going to be high power. Converting electricity is high EMFs.
Have you ever run your equipment inside of a Tesla?
No, I've never driven in a Tesla when I had my EMF meter present.
Really?
But people have sent me videos. I want to. It would be cool.
Yeah,
but it's really hard because, like you saw in your house, measuring radio frequencies is a bit challenging. I'm like, is your Bluetooth off? Is that off? Like the baseline is very high. So you need to make sure everything is clean. And I'm not going to lie, I've seen videos online of people like measuring Teslas. And I'm like, I'm 90% sure their phone is on when they're recording the video. So
they're recording it with their phone, right?
So unless that's on airplane mode, people, and you've removed every other variable, you are not measuring something accurately from a radio frequency perspective. And then who knows how close like the next cell tower is if you're in a public space.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you said 5G, right? It's just everything is additive. We're subtracting nothing, and then everything else around us is getting worse. But there's so much correlative data. There's, you know, tons of studies actually getting into the nitty gritty with like rodents. There was a interphone study. So people don't realize that the IARC, which is not some like end all be all organization, like magnetic fields and radio frequencies.
What does it stand for?
International Agency of Research on Cancer.
Okay.
They are both classified as possible carcinogens. And when they started first looking into radio frequencies in the late 80s, I think it was the EPA or one of these organizations, they did like a preliminary investigation, and they recommended that it be classified as a probable carcinogen. And then the White House did some like side quest and came up with some data, and they were like, no, don't do that. So there's been a lot of back and forth, but the study that the IARC did, called the Interphone study, was from like 2000 to 2004. They spent millions of dollars to look at cell phone users and brain cancer. And this was 2000 to 2004. Not a lot of people were using cell phones. So there was mixed results, but for heavy users, which was up to 30 minutes a day, heavy user had statistically increased risk of brain cancer.
Wow.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like you kind of have to make extrapolations from the data that exists, whether it be from the 70s microwaves using the same frequencies, from phone studies from 20 years ago, because guess who's not studying anything indicative of our actual EMF exposure today? No one. Because no one's going to fund the study. All the researchers who have got canceled, and definitely the industry is not going to publish something that could be potentially harmful. So 5G literally got rolled out with no studies, like nothing.
So 5G is interesting. 5G is like one of the top conspiracy theories out there. All the craziest, deepest tinfoil hat people are like, 5G, Moderna vaccine turns on the nanobots. But one of the when I don't know if you've ever seen the show Westworld on HBO.
Yeah.
Do you see the latest?
It's one of the like few TV shows I've ever watched.
It's one of my favorite shows of all time. The last season of it, they have these towers all around this city that like blast out this signal that frees all the robots, so they can go in and make repairs, and they can go in and make alternations to their simulation that they're in. And I like driving around this town now, and I see 5G towers on every fucking street corner. It reminds me of that, dude. They look similar, and it's like it's hard to avoid thinking about those just crazy cuckoo conspiracy theories when science fiction shows are literally like utilizing the same sort of form of a thing. But like so when it comes to 5G, correct me if I'm wrong, but in your Substack article, you basically explained that it's way higher frequency and far more dangerous, but it's more localized. It's less like of a widespread thing that blankets you.
Yeah. So 5G is complicated because it actually operates in 3 different frequency bands. So it still uses the low frequency, similar bands as 3G and 4G. It's called like the low band. Like 800, 900 megahertz to 2 gigahertz. Then there's the sub 6 gigahertz band, which is kind of in between 2.5 gigahertz to 6 gigahertz, which is new, but kind of the in between. And then there's the millimeter waves, which everyone was really concerned about, because millimeter waves are like 30, 40, maybe even up to 50 gigahertz. So we're talking about like a 10x increase in frequency.
Millimeter waves.
And that's referring to the wavelength. So frequency and wavelength are inversely related.
Okay.
So the higher frequency you go, you get higher energy of the wavelength, and then you get a shorter, you get higher energy of the wave, and then you get a shorter wavelength.
Okay.
So that's just like when you get to 30, 40 gigahertz, it's in the millimeter wave territory as opposed to the centimeter wave territory.
Got it.
So it's just, different characteristics of EM waves. And that's a big jump. It's like 10x increase all of a sudden. We've never done this. They're higher energy. So potentially higher energy is a concern. And that's fair. But the problem is, as you alluded to, it's more local. It's really more challenging because the range on the millimeter waves is terrible. They can only go like a few hundred yards before they get eaten up by, the water vapor in the air. And they get blocked by trees, they get blocked by buildings because of the characteristics of the wave at that frequency. So that's why they have to build these repeater towers everywhere.
What's a repeater? Oh, those are the towers, 5G towers.
Yeah, the 5G towers. You know how like before you would have like one massive tower, it's like over town,
right,
over there. That's working like almost omnidirectionally, where it's just spewing out like 3G, 4G signals in all angles.
Yeah.
just like your Wi-Fi router is. 5G is different because they went to this higher frequency. The only way to really like get anywhere, they have to have a narrow beam width, which when it's more narrow, it's more concentrated. So it's actually higher power. And then they have to have repeater towers. So these smaller towers, these smaller cell stations all over. So that's why you see them on light posts, on buildings, on like disguised as trees, like literally everywhere. And they have this different look.
Look, it's a palm tree one.
Yeah, they try and like disguise it, right? And they have these different looks because they have way more antennas on them because they're using a different frequency.
Makes us feel more in tune with nature when it looks like a palm tree, an electronic palm tree blasting you with cancer.
And that's bad potentially because it's higher power, it's more concentrated, but they really only rolled out millimeter waves where it makes sense because it's a massive infrastructure problem and it makes no sense to have like that in the suburbs or in rural places. Can you tell by looking at one of these towers if it's 5G or 4G or something else? Are there differences or are they mostly all 5Gs? Well, they're mostly now the newer ones with those like big white rectangular blocks are definitely all 5G.
Can I show you
towers.
the one out back real quick and you can see tell me what you think?
Sure.
Let's take a quick break. All right. We just looked at the 5G tower out back and we put up your meter next to it and it looks like it's pretty hot.
It is hot. It is not millimeter waves.
Changed your hat. We got a hat change.
We got a
podcast.
Hat change. Went from the Wyoming-based organic cotton to Make America Healthy Again.
Good.
So,
we got to cover all the bases.
Yeah. Not millimeter waves because you're not in a urban downtown area. So the good thing about 5G millimeter waves, which everyone was the most freaked out about, is because they're so range dependent and very, get eaten up very quickly. They're only ever going to be probably in downtown areas, entertainment centers, airports, big venues.
Vegas Strip is on top of the hotel.
For sure. Where data throughput and, bandwidth matters tremendously. Like if you're in a stadium with 100,000 people, they're going to need insane throughput and it doesn't have to go that far. So that's where they have them on now all the stadiums. The top of the stadium railings have like 5G repeater towers or cells. So that's a good thing about 5G.
Well, then how come when you're in one of those stadiums, you never have phone service?
Well, that's what they're trying to fix. So I haven't been in a pro sports stadium in a long time, so I can't tell you if it's gotten any better. But also the data throughput now, the amount of garbage we're posting on social media and downloading all the time is just always increasing. So it's like they're always just trying to catch up. And that's what people need to understand, that 5G is just 5th generation wireless technology.
Does it mean gigahertz?
It does not mean gigahertz. It just so happens that 5 gigahertz is in the range of like where 5G midband is used. So it's very confusing. And it's very confusing for the layman because even for me diving into this, there's not a lot of information out there. And there's a lot of people reporting on 5G in 2020, 2021, and not a lot of updates since. But I can tell you millimeter waves have actively been rolled out every major city in the US for sure, downtown areas, entertainment centers, airports especially, and they're probably never going to be rolled out in suburbia, maybe, and rural areas for sure not. So that's where the mid band, like 3 to 6 gigahertz, you get the sweet spot of slightly higher frequency, slightly higher data throughput, but you're not, dropping out every 100 yards. So I don't know for sure. This measures, my EMF meter measures 200 megahertz to 8 gigahertz. So that could be mid band, that could be low band, but for sure we went out there, we measured it, we stood like 20 feet away from it. It's hot, but what did you realize? You're like, oh, that's not even as bad as my bedroom.
Right, my bedroom was worse than that. Next to my baby monitor. That baby monitor, dude, was like sitting next to Chernobyl or something.
Not quite, but
it was like 400,000 on that.
It was about 10 times higher than standing 20 feet away from the cell tower. So that's what I like to tell you, people. Distance is everything. And
yes,
I would
worry.
It
was 10x next to a baby monitor than it was sitting next to a 5G cell phone tower.
Yes, that's correct.
That is insane.
but also our phones were off out there. If you like connected your phone and then it was pinging the tower, again, your phone is the biggest source. Whatever is closest to you is going to be the biggest source. Like that baby monitor was so close to where you're sleeping.
That's true.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's good. Why? You can't move a cell tower. You can change how you use your technology and how you interact with it. And it is really criminal, I would say. And something I learned and talked about on the Maha podcast was the legislation side of things a bit more. And the Telecommunications Act of 1996, it actually took away the ability for state and local government to have any say in where wireless infrastructure gets placed. It's purely a federal decision, and if they give the green light to the industry, they can put towers wherever they want. And that's why you saw the 5G rollout. All of a sudden, there was towers being built everywhere. Nobody could do anything about it. And to me...
So he leases, the guy who owns this, he leases that land to them for that tower.
Yeah, and it depends maybe on certain agreements, but for the most part, there's pretty much no say. And that was the most lobbied bill of like the time here. Like the wireless industry lobbied like $50 million, and that was back 30 years ago, and nothing has really changed. That's also coincidentally the last year that wireless technology safety thresholds and guidelines were updated. And that's what RFK and the Children's Health Defense successfully sued the FCC for being negligent in safety standards and guidelines because they haven't been updated in, over 25 years.
When did he do this?
2021, they won the lawsuit. You could look that up.
Look that up.
More details. Children's Health Defense sues the FCC, and RFK Jr. was a presiding attorney there, and they won. But nothing's happened. So I'm really excited to, I was talking to the Maha team, like, is he actually, you think he's actually going to do some stuff on EMFs? Because guess what? There's a lot of issues out there. This one's probably the hardest one to tackle, from just how sticky the infrastructure situation is. Oh, it's 2022.
You got to type in 2022 at the top, Steve.
Oh, no, it's good. You got it. That was the right one.
That was it.
Okay.
Oh, no, it was 2021. The article is just in.
Okay, so this is the article. Scroll down.
And they made the case
summary
for children.
Challenging the FCC's wireless radiation guidelines. On August 31st, 2021, the U.S. Court of Appeals of the D.C. Circuit published decisions on the historic case. Health Defense in its landmark case against the Federal Communications Commission, challenging the FCC's decision to not review its health and safety guidelines regarding 5G and wireless technology. The court's decision states that the FCC failed to provide a reasoned explanation for its determination that its current guidelines adequately protect against harmful effects of exposure to radio frequency radiation, and failed to review the extensive scientific evidence, and evidence of existing sicknesses that was filed with the FCC. So nothing's changed. So they won the case, but there's been no sort of extra regulations put on these people, or maybe they just got a shitload more money from them.
Nothing's happened, and that's why I'm really excited to see.
Has RFK talked about any of this stuff like in the last 6 months?
He has a little bit, but not a ton. And I don't think it's the place to start, to be honest. Like, this stuff is hard. What is he going to do? You can't just like snap your fingers and all of a sudden red 40 dye is gone. That doesn't exist with radio frequencies.
Right. Well, the crazy thing about him is like before he got confirmed by the Senate, there was all these senators coming out saying like, if he starts saying crazy stuff, we're not voting for his ass.
Yeah. Well, he's playing the game. So
you have to play the game.
You have to play the game.
That's the unfortunate part of the whole thing, because it's so. I mean, it's got to be so. I mean, who's to say he's not corruptible? Yeah, we don't know that. He's never been in this position before.
But just spending time with his team, they told me he is fired up about EMFs, and the Children's Health Defense. Like, they're two big topics. Like, EMFs is one of them. The vaccines are the other one. And I'm stoked to see if there's anything that's going to come of the EMF situation, because it's so hard. What are they going to do? These towers already exist. We're operating on this wireless infrastructure. It's not like they can just switch to something different. They could change the safety thresholds and guidelines. You know, Russia, other Eastern European countries, they do have more stringent standards, and they do have even more stringent standards for like schools and hospitals, etc. But I don't think that would make like a meaningful change. What I would really like to see is better science, better research. Let's fund some studies from the HHS or the NIH that's simulating what the actual exposure is. Okay, we have a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. Danny just made a call on 900 megahertz, and there's another like 6 gigahertz band over there. That's a real life exposure. And there's all these different input signals. There's never been a study done like that. And all the industry funded studies are an absolute joke. And then the ones that people have skated by on or are really old are not exactly applied to how technology is working today. So I think that's probably the biggest impact that he can make in the short term. And, you know, at Daylight, I'm going to try and reinvent wireless technology. I'm just going to think of something and hopefully we can try it out. Maybe get some research grants to look into, like, what if we used infrared range for wireless data communication? That's an option. Li-Fi actually is a thing. So people are
Li-Fi?
Yeah, it's using infrared terahertz wavelengths to use data communication. But I'm skeptical that even that would be non-harmful to humans. The idea is, so radio frequencies, Danny, if I go to the mountains where I hunt, do you know what this says? It says zero. Nothing. This 200 megahertz, 8 gigahertz is completely alien. It doesn't exist. Light fidelity.
Whoa, that's Li-Fi. Light fidelity. Wireless communication technology that uses light to transmit data over visible light, ultraviolet, and infrared spectrums. Whoa.
So potentially,
transmitter is available from Hyperion Tech, which features a 940 nm 1W IR LED and supports a wide bandwidth of 100 kHz to 25 MHz. Okay, whatever the fuck that means.
That's 1 watt.
1 watt infrared, 940 nanometers. So it's basically an infrared LED, and they're using it to transmit data, which is cool because the idea is we are used to infrared light. Like that's something the body has taken as an input signal for a long time.
Yeah.
So the idea is it would be less harmful potentially than radio frequency, which is completely alien. However, I'm not 100% certain that would still be the case, because a lot of the research from the 70s, from Alan Frey, from folks like Dr. Martin Powell, who has looked into like voltage gated ion channel activation from EMFs, they all say the same thing, that it's not just about the frequency, it's about the modulation. So a frequency is one component, but in order to get the data through, you have to modulate the wave to carry the data to be received by the receiving transceiver, and that is very pulsed. It's very unnatural. Like sunlight and electromagnetic waves in nature are just like continuous waves. They don't have modulation techniques applied to them. So you still are going to have to modulate an infrared wave because there needs to be data on the wave, or else like that's the whole point of wireless technology. So I'm curious. I would love to test it. I would love to see research on alternative solutions like that. And that's kind of what's exciting. But it's multifaceted. It's very complicated. We started talking about light. Dude, light's pretty easy. I'm not going to lie. We just need a copy of the sun. The rest of the electromagnetic spectrum is far more complex, and we haven't even talked about like the Earth's natural magnetic field and resonance, and fields interacting with each other, having a biological effect. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. So when it comes to the Daylight computer, how did you and Anjan get hooked up about it, and then what specifically are you working on in regards to the technology and everything you guys are doing at the company?
Yeah, so I had Anjan on my podcast last January. My old podcast where I talked about
a year ago, January.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Over a year ago. Decentralized radio was called. Had a lot of these researchers that I read their papers and I just wanted to ask them questions about kind of this electromagnetic health stuff. And Yeah, halfway through the podcast, I was kind of in between. I left my engineering job like 3-4 months earlier. I worked in the semiconductor industry for 5 years, and I'm an electrical engineer, but I went right into the more of the business side of product marketing management of the industry, and then was building my health brand and podcasting and writing and coaching a bit. Was like, I don't really know. That's not what I'm meant to do. I have this kind of very specific skill set, and then I met Anjan. I was like, oh, this is the most important company in the world to succeed, because there is no alternative. No one's building healthier tech. And I knew it was possible. Like, I knew about all this stuff. It was engineering changes that needed to happen, but you're competing with the biggest companies in the world, so the barrier to entry is so high. But Anjan's like, yeah, we're releasing a product to the market in like 6 months or 5 months.
Yeah, but you guys are going the opposite direction.
Yeah,
You're not competing with them. You're almost in a completely separate world.
But I know how, working in the chip industry, I knew how hard it is to get started, because nobody cares about you when you're low volume. Nobody cares about you. Everyone's doing hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of units.
Sure.
So when you're a small guy,
it's hard.
It's so hard to get started. So I knew it from that perspective as well. And then, I jumped on board. I was like, I'm working for you full time. I started just like health marketing stuff. He didn't even know like what exactly I did in the past, but I slowly just took on more and more. And now I'm head of operations and marketing. So I'm kind of like, running the company with Anjan. And
dude, it's such an exciting product. I don't think
amazing.
I've ever been so excited about a tech product in my life. Like other than when the iPhone first came out. Because I remember when the first iPhone came out, I think it was like 2008, 2009, something like that. And like my buddy had one, and it was just like, holy shit, how does this fucking exist? This thing, you just touch it, you swipe it, it makes these little sounds, and it makes the screen changes, and it does things just with touch. There's not been anything since the first iPhone came out that groundbreaking technologically, consumer wise, in my experience. But like this, it's the same. It's a touch screen, but like the goal of it is to reduce all the negative effects of technology, which there's nothing else like that I've ever seen, which is why it's so fucking cool. Because you can do things like read a book, browse the internet, listen to podcasts, sketch on it, all this crazy stuff, and it is optimized to work outside, which is, I love it, because I've literally been outside, spending more time outside during the day reading, which is great. It makes me get my ass out there, and like, everything about it is just amazing. I literally, like I just told you before we started this podcast, I take notes on this during every podcast now, which is like, and it's cool because you can save it all, and you're not dealing with this thing that's connected to this whole like Apple walled garden where all of these notifications are connected to everything on my phone, my computer, my laptop. Like, it's just disconnected, decentralized, which is why it's so fucking sick. And I don't know. I think that that there's got to be. I mean, I understand it's going to be really fucking hard for you guys, and I'm sure you could probably elaborate on that a little bit, but that vision that you guys have, and like that, the why behind your company is completely genuine and completely unique.
Yeah. And it's cool because people are ready for it. And, just talking to, like the Maha stuff is like, is this real? Like, I've been doing this stuff for like 6-7 years now, and there's people who've been talking about this stuff for decades. And, I met some friends in Austin that have been living kind of this life for 15 years. And it's like, this is actually finally happening. We have so much momentum. People are becoming aware of these problems. It's kind of the benefit of the internet and of social media to some degree, and podcasts like yourself, like the new age of media, actually being able to elaborate on these topics. Like, people can listen to this podcast and be like, yeah, this guy, he's pretty fired up about health and EMF. So it's not, there's nothing to fake here. Like, same with Anjan, right? Like, you can get on a podcast. It's so genuine. Our marketing is just, it's real. Yeah. And that's the company mission, is let's return to what's actually real. Like, get outside. Let's have real conversations, real relationships, not being sucked into the Apple ecosystem or the Google ecosystem. And especially for children, which we're most passionate about, they're just being set up for failure on every level because we're handing them devices at such a young age. And not only is there direct impact from the light, the EMFs, it's keeping them indoors, and then that's the reality they grow up in, and they're just missing out on all of that experience. And who is surprised when there's all these mental health issues
Right.
and physical health issues that stem from that. So for us, we're just so grateful, and there is no one else, doing this. There's no one who's ever made a consumer electronics hardware product that's like, I'm going to market this to be healthier. So we think it's a massive opportunity. We're super excited. We're super focused on building better solutions. And I'm actively talking about things we're looking into. Like, I hope someone else talks or looks into Li-Fi, and we want to add infrared LEDs to our backlight and maybe do a few other things. And we're investigating. But if you have ideas or you have experience, like, hit us up. We want to collaborate with people because we're still a really small team, and it's going to take some time to keep improving on this. But even the first gen product, I use it for everything almost, and or at least every day for 4 to 5 hours, taking notes and messaging, and that's like,
you can send messages on it.
Yeah, like WhatsApp, Slack.
Oh, really?
Telegram.
Oh,
yeah.
So I should have known that.
You can do that. When you connect a keyboard, it definitely unlocks more of the full computer functionality.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. I mean, I can't work on things that I'm not like super passionate about. So I'm just so grateful that I have this opportunity where everything I've done the past decade basically can be channeled into making daylight a success. And if daylight's a success, then people have the optionality to make better choices in terms of technology that isn't harmful for their health.
Anjan was explaining how this screen technology, you could like only find it in Japan.
Yeah. That's where he pioneered it. He innovated with some researchers, and we're manufacturing it. So the display is the innovation.
Yeah, because it's like a Kindle on steroids, but it's not because you can zoom in and out. It's super quick, but it looks like that ink. What is the ink?
Electronic ink is what Kindle.
It looks like electronic ink.
All the e-readers use.
So this is the only device that has that special Japanese screen technology that utilizes that.
Yeah, it's out. Anjan came up with that with the researchers, and then they're implementing it from a manufacturing perspective. So it's the only 60 plus frames per second refresh rate e-paper product tablet.
What does have you guys talked to anybody? I asked Anjan this, but from your perspective, like, how much time have you spent in like Silicon Valley around other people that are working for other tech companies? And have you seen like what their reactions are to this stuff or this topic in general?
Yeah, most of our investors and a lot of our early supporters are from Silicon Valley, I would say. And they're people, I think, that are seeing what's coming. They've seen what they've created and worked on, and how it's really not bringing out the best in people anymore. And they themselves, I think we're at a point now where if you ask the average person, they're like, yeah, social media and my phone, I don't really have the best relationship with that. I'm kind of addicted. And it's true. Everyone, literally myself included, probably you, like we doom scroll. Like it's designed that way. It's so hard to not be sucked in.
Yeah.
And then those people, a lot of them, they either have money, disposable income, because they did make some wealth from whatever SaaS startup or other company they had. And they want to support something that seems a bit more meaningful. And yeah, I would say a lot of our early supporters, they're big, deep work people. So productivity, reading, writing. And I would say overall from the individual perspective, the reception in Silicon Valley has been pretty great. I mean, I don't hang out there a lot. I live in Wyoming. So, but from what I've, experienced and gathered, it's been really positive. I think it's been positive in so many ways. And we just went to South by Southwest and we won like an innovation.
Oh, in Austin.
Yeah, in Austin. We won an innovation award, and a bunch of people, especially parents, were coming up to us like, this is so amazing. Like, I've been looking for something like this. Like, can't wait to get this for my daughter, because I just like don't want to give her an iPad, but it's helpful to have something, and you could probably relate to that better than me. But that's what's cool about this. And we haven't even spent a ton of effort on marketing, and we don't really have the bandwidth.
You guys have the sickest website I've ever seen in my life.
We spent a lot of effort on the website and the launch videos. I will say that, but then after that, we haven't. We've kind of been quiet.
If you can scroll through this website and not spend money on this iPad, then this healthy iPad. I call it a healthy iPad. That's what my kid calls it.
Acceptable. It's acceptable.
If you can scroll through this website and not buy one, you have enormous self-control.
Yeah, our team did such an incredible job on that. It's brilliant, and that's the thing. When we do things, we want to do it, on brand. So it's not like jumping out and having all these colors in your face and any type of content. We're trying to be very true to our brand and very authentic. But that's why discussions like this podcast is so powerful, because people can actually align with what we stand for, and hear Anjan and hear myself talk about these topics, and that's what it's all about for me. But we've been building, so we're really excited at what's to come in the next couple of years, and for us, this is just the beginning, really.
So does this? Obviously, it's very unique screen technology because there's no blue light, and you guys have this sort of like incandescent color, right? This like full spectrum color to it. But like, what have you done, or what do you guys plan on doing with like the frequencies, like because does this put off the same radiation as an iPhone? Yeah.
So the EMFs have not been optimized at all at the hardware level. We technically have a weaker Wi-Fi chip because we're just like a startup with a worse Wi-Fi chip than an iPad. Yeah. I've done like a head-to-head of this versus my MacBook, and it's actually like significantly lower for just that reason, which is pretty funny. We're coming out with smart airplane mode, which is going to be a software update, which takes very little effort. Any company could do it, where say right here, this is connected to Wi-Fi, but I haven't used it in like a minute. They're just going to airplane mode.
Oh, cool.
And then instead of pinging the network every 8 to 10 seconds, like right now, like same with my phone, like I manually put it in airplane mode, like it's in airplane mode right now. If you're not a psychopath like me who does that all the time, you're never going to do that. But if it was sitting next to you, do you need it constantly connected? And then maybe it just pings like when you have a custom setting every 5 minutes, or on a daylight. That's not what this is for. So it can be in airplane mode much longer.
Yeah.
And we're thinking of what's the best way to do it. But that's such an easy lift for us, smart airplane mode. And, you won't have to remember to do that. Then in the next generation products, we're definitely looking into how we can optimize EMFs, EMI, radiation, RF at the hardware level. But I'm going to say it's pretty complex. It's pretty tricky. Like we're going to be the first company that's ever tried to do this. And we have some ideas like, hey, what if there's some sensors on the daylight computer to where it knows your position in space, and then it's only outputting the radiation, the Wi-Fi connectivity, away from you.
Right.
That would be cool. And that actually wouldn't be too challenging to do. A lot of the newer chipsets have directionality functionality. So that should be possible, like theoretically in my head. So I'm going to explore that. And, Wi-Fi is all around the room. So it's not going to make your connection or your throughput any worse.
Right.
So that's something. There's shielding, there's filtering potentially to look into. But again, if you're an electrical engineer listening to this, and I'm not an RF engineer, but if anyone has any ideas, hit me up. Tristan at daylightcomputer.com. Or the Li-Fi thing, like long term, maybe that's it. Maybe in like a couple generations, we build a Li-Fi router and we move our devices to that. Because what I can tell you, Danny, no one's going to move to hardwired internet. I do that in my house because I think for at-home setups.
You're a psycho.
Yeah, I think for at-home setups, it's actually not bad because.
What, hardwired?
Yeah, if you set it up to where.
Sorry to wake up. You want to try it?
What is that? Smelling salt?
It's like a ammonia salt stuff.
Boy.
It just wakes you up.
This is what the kids are doing now.
Yeah. I have to do it every once in a while.
Oh, wow. That was a light sniff.
No Wi-Fi necessary.
Let's go. Yeah. So if you connect it like if you set it up the way it's not super inconvenient, it's better. You get better data throughput. It's more security.
It is, yeah.
And then you have lower EMF exposure as well. So I think for like home office setups, if you're building a new house or getting a new setup and you just pay someone to do it, if you have the means, you can make it pretty convenient. But if you're on the go, like your phone, no one's ever going to hardwire their phone.
Well, that's like the crazy thing about, like, you know, people talk about this Internet of Things with 5G.
Smart homes. And, you know, everything just being connected everywhere.
And, you know, it's scary, dude. I just had this dude in here a couple months ago who was talking about how his TV was spying on him. And these people, these like hackers were like messaging him, trying to extort him because they were like recording shit he did off of his TV. Like not just audio, but I think video too.
Is he like a prevalent guy? Like
no,
just some random guy?
No, just some random dude.
Oh my.
I forgot. No, he was working on a movie or something. He was like an actor in a movie. And I don't know. It's a crazy story. But like, you know, how like looking at China, for example, with all of the security state that they live in and the cameras everywhere, and I don't know how much 5G they use, but I imagine, especially living in the dense metropolitan areas in China, just bringing your little meter out there would make it probably explode with all the connectivity that they have.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And do you need that? Do you need like your washing machine to talk to your smart meter, to talk to your, you know, Amazon accounts, or really do we actually need that? Or is that just a byproduct of the fiat economy and selling us more stuff that we don't need and collecting data that is just going to sell more product to us? So we're big privacy advocates too. Like
that's where the tinfoil hat really starts to shine, is when you think about all the things that all these smart products and this Internet of Things and government control, because like the most of this stuff is in China, where they have complete total control and surveillance over everybody with all this technology that they have. So when you have your washing machine or your hair dryer that has a microphone built into it, you know, it's just like, where does that road lead?
Yeah.
You know?
And it might just be for collecting data so they can sell you more products. But even if it's just that, that's also
even if it is just that, right? Which it most likely is. It's most likely not.
It doesn't even matter. I don't want that. I don't want that invasion of my privacy, and I definitely don't want to be sold more products. So to me, regardless of where we stand on the reason for all this, it's not okay, and it can't, you know, change. But we didn't even talk about, you know, some of the mind control, or you said moving people around. Something that is very factual is like the military does use radio frequencies for like active denial systems, they're called, and they use millimeter waves. So
active denial,
yeah, it's this 95 gigahertz.
You're talking like crowd control stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's a real thing. It's been like 20 years, and that is straight up just a very high powered 95 gigahertz millimeter wave.
The videos of it are insane,
and they can crank it to where it feels like your skin is on fire. Right. It feels like your body, because it has such it'll heat your body up like 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. So that's where, this is not a conspiracy theory. That exists. Real. And there is definitely
top one, Steve.
Like you were saying, if they wanted to move people around, like in Westworld, I'm sure they could do that. If they actually wanted to do that, they could do that. And maybe that's like what warfare is all about.
So give us some volume on this. So these are volunteers.
This is a military area. Move away from the perimeter.
Their new active denial system boasts a reach far beyond any other non-lethal system.
Well, it's a versatile system, and it has a range of non-lethal capability that we can't even come close to with any of our fielded systems.
Just play it. Let it play.
It goes very shallow into where your nerve receptors are. And there's no permanent injury caused by it. Very safe system. We've built in some safety margins and training for the operators.
They even let any of the guests volunteer to test out its effectiveness and safety, including the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
It is something that, once again, probably the safest system that we've developed as far as the non-lethal capability.
From Washington, I'm Sergeant Andrew Milner.
The safest non-lethal.
They put non-lethal and safe in there a lot of times.
Yeah.
But then
and these people are having seizures the next day.
They blasted it on someone and they moved him. So that's moving crowd control right there. So that's not a conspiracy theory. And I think
they've been doing this stuff since the Cold War.
And I sent you, I think, a PDF. I need to read it again, but there's literally directed energy weapon documents from the military that you can just look up.
Yeah.
It's not conspiracy theory. This is warfare in 2025. It's going to be all drones. It's going to be all DDWs, lasers, and EM waves.
Yes.
And that's real. If they wanted to use it on civilians, I think the other case to be made is, some of these research studies from the past that show like rats becoming docile from, electric field or magnetic field exposure and things like that. There's like maybe a case to be made there, but then guess what? Everyone is consuming the same environment. So would they be doing that to themselves? Maybe they have some crystal that protects them. The higher ups. I don't know, but. Yeah, to me it doesn't matter. It's like we have a problem here, and we need to think of what's a better solution for wireless technology. But
so, what was that thing you were telling me about that you could install on your breaker panel? It's like a switch or something that you can use to turn off a certain room in your house, like at nighttime when you're going to bed, just flip off the power in your room.
Yeah, so we said that turning your circuit breaker off in your bedroom would have a drastic effect on reducing your AC body voltage.
We turned the breaker off just for my bedroom, and it reduced it by like 100,000, by like 10,000 times.
It was. You don't want to turn your breaker on and off all the time. Like mechanical switches like that were not meant to be like, it's not a light switch. It technically could be unsafe after a certain point. So you would never recommend someone do that. You probably could do it on a new breaker. But the safe thing to do would be to get like a relay install, and then there's companies that make solutions where they can hook it up to a remote control and that just flips on and off. So you could be like, hey, I want my bedroom, the kid's bedroom to be on this, to where I hit the button at 10 p.m., the circuit breakers turn off, and only the kitchen and the AC is powered on at night, so that my electrical power and low frequency EMF exposure is far reduced. So you can get that. There's companies that make solutions like that, and there's also like you could just ask your electrician to probably do something like that if you have a good electrician. So that's something to consider.
Save power and don't bake your brain.
There we go. And then you can use that electricity that you're not using to power your incandescent
bulbs, right?
There we go. There's a lot. I mean, I think there's a lot of studies out there, and I would say the vast majority, if not all of them, like 80 to 90% of them that aren't funded by industry show harmful biological effects. And I would say this is kind of a very inconvenient truth for people. So I don't want to be like fear mongering, you're going to die because of all this 5G and Wi-Fi. It's just another stressor on top of this toxic cake. We have the food, we have the plastics, we have the water, we have the lights, we have now the EMFs. It is another thing. And in my opinion, the electromagnetic environment might be the most important, if not because it's what we're consuming 24/7, 365 days a year. And the argument usually made against it is that non-ionizing radiation isn't harmful. And we already talked about studies of weak magnetic fields, increasing risk of childhood leukemia. We looked at other studies for, cell phone exposure risk. That's all non-ionizing. So I think that's without foundation. And I think that's just something that people use because that's what they've been taught. And it's like a blanket statement that is like, oh, there's no way. And it's invisible, it's intangible. So people really can't understand the impact that it's having. But it's a low level stressor that's present in the environment. It's disrupting your sleep. It's disrupting your cellular communication. Like your mitochondria are really the hub of communication and energy production. And think of it, right? Like think of it like me and you are in this room. We're talking to each other. We can hear, each other very clearly. It's a great conversation. Imagine if 50 people were in here. You think we'd be able to hear each other as clearly? Imagine if there's 100 people in here. The signal to noise ratio, because of this electromagnetic environment that's alien, has never been lower. There's all this noise going on, and our body is using electromagnetic fields to communicate, to drive cellular processes. And when we have these non-native input signals, that becomes distorted. And then we get, timing interruptions. We get there's trillions of cellular reactions and functions being executed like every second.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how people should think about this, is that there's so much noise going on, and it's constantly keeping us in this sympathetic dominant fight or flight state. So you really never have that chance to be in the state that you're meant to be and fully relax and executing functions normally. And at the lowest level, our biology is electromagnetic. That's what people can't conceive. And I'm like, what are we using to measure all of these things in the hospital? Use an EEG to measure your brain, an EKG. Those are purely electrical.
Yeah.
MRI machines for torn ACLs, cancers. It's magnetic resonance imaging. And there's just such a disconnect between medicine, modern medicine, academia, and this world of electromagnetism, because no one's really taught physics. And then the physicists and engineers, they don't know anything about biology.
Right.
So that's the only reason why people talk to me, is because I'm just like,
you're the only one that's making the connection.
One of few people. There's a lot of good folks out there, but a lot of them have been, suppressed, had their funding stripped over the years, and nothing has changed. Like, go and read a lot of these books. The Invisible Rainbow is an amazing one. Rest in peace to Arthur Firstenberg. The guy who wrote that just died 2 weeks ago.
What was that one about?
That was more high level, and he correlated that the electrification of society directly correlated with the increase of chronic disease. Now, that happened across the 20th century, mostly in the 40s, and then 99% of society was electrified by the 60s.
Chronic disease, was there any specification of which disease was the most prevalent out of them?
Heart disease. I sent you a picture of the one graph he had. I'm gonna pull it up on my phone, but it's basically, again, this is correlation, not causation.
I can text it to Steve. He could show it on the screen.
Yeah, it's rate of rural heart disease in 1940, which was when only the cool states had electricity. So,
okay, this thing I should send him?
Yeah.
All right, Steve, I'm emailing this to you right now.
Copy. And basically, Arthur Firstenberg just talks about that, and he talks about some crazy stuff that telecom cables, when they were introduced in the late 1800s, all of a sudden the flu went from being something that happened every 5 to 8 years, now happened every single year. And it used to be more tracked to
flu?
The flu used to only be a phenomenon, apparently, that occurred every few years, really badly. And it correlated with the solar cycles. So there's an 11-year solar cycle, and we're actually in a peak year right now. So if you're wondering why a bunch of crazy stuff is happening, you could say the solar cycle has somewhat of impact, because there's a solar maximum, and that means the most amount of sunspots are happening, the most amount of geomagnetic storms, which means the most amount of magnetic variables and disturbances. And that's been studied and looked at, and having
it's called a solar cycle?
Yeah, 11-year, and we're in a solar maximum.
Can you look that up? I need to read about this. How have I not had anyone tell me about this?
July 2025 is the peak. So
July 2025 is the peak of the solar cycle, meaning there's more electricity?
You can read it.
Yeah. Okay, the solar cycle, which is approximately 11 years long, is the periodic change in the sun's activity measured by variations in the number of sunspots on the surface. Okay, the cycle is driven by the sun's magnetic field, which reverses direction every 11 years, lending to fluctuations in solar radiation, ejections from solar material, and the occurrence of solar flares and coronal loops. The 11-year period is influenced by the differential rotation speed between the sun's poles and equator, causing the magnetic field to stretch and eventually reverse. So the magnetic field of the sun reverses every 11 years? Is that what this is saying?
Yeah. And that's having an impact on the magnetic environment on the Earth. And there's studies that look at psychiatric patients and overall like mental health of people that are very sensitive. And when there's increased solar activity and magnetic disturbances, that can be felt. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but there's more variation. And this is all what I'm getting at here.
Keep scrolling down, Steve. Sorry, keep going.
Is that we are electromagnetic beings. The only reason there's life on this planet, Danny, is because we have a magnetic field that protects us from all of the a lot of the ionizing radiation from the sun. And we have a magnetic field in the earth because the earth has a molten iron core, which is moving charges.
Yeah.
And that moving charge is creating a powerful magnetic field that's protecting us. And that magnetic field is driving our biology. It actually influences our circadian rhythm.
Sure.
And that's why potentially these weak magnetic fields from power lines and other products are harmful.
Look at that NASA link.
Because we are, it's called electromagnetic interference in electrical engineering. When we have interference or noise on the line, that's disrupting the real input signal. And the real input signal we need is the Earth's magnetic field, the Schumann's resonance, which is a natural resonance phenomenon in the Earth, and the solar spectrum.
The sun has a magnetic pole flip every 11 years. That'd be like North and the South poles swapping places every decade. And the sun transitions from being calm to, holy shit, dude.
If that happened on Earth, we would not exist.
Exactly. It would wipe out humanity.
That's also happening slowly. Magnetic pole reversal is definitely happening.
The North Pole is moving, and we just talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's like a couple feet per year, right? Yeah. It was like 12 feet per year. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, it was like a few feet. I don't remember.
A few feet per year.
And it's increasing, and the overall strength of the magnetic field is decreasing. So we're definitely in the early stages probably of a magnetic pole reversal, but these things take thousands of years to play out. So this is what we should be studying more, not like going to Mars, in my opinion. But we are learning a lot about the magnetic or electromagnetic environment by looking in space. So I will say that. Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm trying to get at here is we are designed for this electromagnetic environment that goes on into the earth. So I usually
evolved here.
I usually start podcasts with telling people that, but we're doing the opposite here because I want people to know that we are electromagnetic beings. And the Schumann's resonance, for example, is a phenomenon where lightning strikes occur and there's an electromagnetic resonance in the cavity in the atmosphere, and the Earth's naturally resonating at like 7 to 8 hertz in its first harmonic. That's the same frequency as our alpha brainwave, and that's not a coincidence that occurs. And then when we have these low frequency fields from technology, of course it's going to have a potential effect on our mental states. Yeah. And that's something that again is very esoteric for mainstream science and medicine, but it's the truth. And the overall acknowledgement that we just need to study more phenomenons on the electromagnetic environment. And the other point I want to make here is that this is all very localized. So if I were to give a recommendation for health, it's not only, getting outdoors is beneficial and getting connected to your environment is beneficial because we are designed to take all the input signals from our local environments. Mm-hmm. But that local environment is different depending where you are. So what you're doing in Florida and what I'm doing in Wyoming is different. And different modalities and foods and things will affect us differently because the electromagnetic environment is different. There's a different magnetic field coming out of the earth at different directional vectors. And that's where all this gets really complicated because there are things such as resonance with certain molecules in our body that are interacting with various fields, such as the electromagnetic field of the earth. And depending on your location, it's going to have a different effect. So if we do research this stuff, there's just so many confounding independent variables to consider. And I hope someone has the foresight to think about all of that. But that's also why where you live and embracing the local environment and season is very important because we're cyclical creatures, and everything that goes on, even the magnetic field of the earth has a rhythm, our circadian rhythms, the seasonality. I'm very big on all of that stuff, and it's kind of nuanced. So even the mainstream health influencers, they live on a beach somewhere in the tropics. You really shouldn't always follow their advice if you live in the Northeast and it's January.
Right. Okay, so this says the pole has been moving at a rate of 45 kilometers per year, northwest.
You said feet. You're off by a little bit.
So what's 45 kilometers to feet?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it,
45,
Steve? Do you know?
that's like 30 miles.
Oh shit.
45 kilometers is like 30 miles. That's crazy if that's real.
Is it that much? Wow.
Yeah, almost exactly.
27 miles per year. Oh my God.
That's what we should be studying. Like, I think
somebody has to be studying that.
Not enough. Not that I've
Maybe
seen.
they just don't want to let the public know. Because if you're in charge and you're figuring out that this Earth's about to do a pole flip, are you going to tell the public?
It's hard.
That would be the equivalent of telling them there's an alien invasion.
Do you think?
I think so, yeah.
In 222 years, the pole will be flipped completely.
I don't think that's...
What?
If it's moving at that, yeah.
That seems off.
That has to be off,
yeah,
bro.
Brave. I don't know. I like Brave. But
Brave is the Bitcoin browser.
Well, the planet is 6,000 miles across. Is that right?
I don't know.
Yeah, so
see what Chrome has to say.
all I know is that these pole reversals do take thousands of years, and then it can just happen like all of a sudden. So it can.
Yeah.
It does accelerate over time.
Yeah, well, it has to do with like the ice sheets getting really heavy, right? And then melting and getting really light, and then that has to like somehow like releases the crust from the core, or the mantle rather, and then makes the outer part of the Earth. So 8,000 miles is the diameter of the Earth. So we'll figure out. Ask first.
8,000 divided by 27.
Find out if it's really 27 miles per year. That might not be real.
That would be what I would be.
I would try another browser. You got to have two. You can't just have. We can't just rely on Brave.
But folks,
Just like you can't just rely on Chrome. You gotta.
Yeah.
You gotta hedge your bets a little
check
bit.
your sources. Do your own research.
Then we'll ask China what they say our Earth North Pole is shifting.
Their new, was it DeepSeek?
Oh yeah, DeepSeek.
But that's something Robert O. Becker even wrote about. He was like, pole reversals have been correlated with like 80% of all extinction events. And he wrote about that in the 80s. I don't even know if that's exactly true, but I'd imagine it would be.
The Earth's magnetic pole is currently drifting at a speed of 31 to 37 miles per year.
Wow.
So who is this according to? Hit show more. This is Google AI.
It used to be 6 and now it's 30.
That's frightening.
Oh, wow. From 9 to 37.
So this is why Elon's trying to get us to Mars?
I would be concerned. I didn't know that's insane. That means the compasses aren't going to work very soon, folks.
Right, like soon. In 100 years, it's going to be halfway there?
I guess. That's wild.
In less than 100 years, we'll be more than halfway flipped.
That's pretty cool.
So at one point, the idea is that it goes, and then it just like, the ice cap gets so heavy, just
yeah, just like, that could be a chaotic.
And how are we going to get to Mars, bro?
Dude,
how are we going to get to the moon? How are we going to get through the Van Allen radiation belt?
But that is another example of like why our electromagnetic environment is so important. People, they go up there, they get osteoporosis, they get all these chronic diseases.
What's that thing called that he was that Jack was speaking about, the pregnenolone steal syndrome? So all the astronauts had to they all came back with like virtually no testosterone.
Yeah, hormonal dysfunction.
I guess that's legit.
I mean, it's all regulated by electromagnetism at the end of the day, at the lowest level. And that's where even, supplements, for example, antioxidants, oxidative signaling in our body is so important, because that's what's reacting with our electromagnetic environment, like free radicals and oxygen in general, paramagnetic molecules in our body. So if we just like blunt all of that all the time, you're really blunting the ability to take in the input signals of your environment, which could be problematic, could be beneficial if you're traveling.
How fucked are we going to be if we end up having to move to the Earth or to the moon or to Mars? Are you going to be on one of the journeys to go to are you just going to stay here and go down with the ship?
I will stay here. I am not moving to Mars.
Dude, that's gotta be so unhealthy for us. Like it's gonna like, I can't imagine what it's gonna look like, but a human lifespan is probably gonna go down so much.
Do you know what? I can't believe how resilient we are in our current state. This is what's cool. I can't believe with all this stuff we're talking about, we're still walking around like, people are drinking 4 cups of coffee and whatever stimulants and antidepressants, but
Yeah.
we're doing pretty good for how much toxic stuff is in the environment.
Yeah.
And even travel. Like, I can get on a flight to Australia and somehow my body figures it out. I don't feel great.
Yeah.
And the problem I've found is once you get hyper connected to your environment, you become more sensitive to being uprooted and going somewhere
Dude,
else.
it is hard to kill people.
But it is damn hard to kill people.
It is hard to kill. There's this documentary called Mr. Death. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It's this dude who his dad worked for the Bureau of Prisons, and they had one of their electric chairs went bad, and they had to fix it. So he brought it to his house, and his son started tinkering around with it, figured out how to make it work, better. They brought it back at work. So now he became the repairman for the electric chair. Next thing you know, they're like, oh shit, the states are making us come up with more humane ways of executing people. So he came up with gas chambers. Then he came up with the lethal injections. And this kid that was just like, had no background in this stuff, just figured out how to fix an electric chair, was now in charge of implementing all of the execution devices across all the prisons around the country.
Wow.
And he was in his book or in his documentary, he explains like a lot of them didn't fucking work. Like people weren't dying. They were just getting like tortured. And he was like, the human body is really hard to kill.
Yeah. And that's where people are like, well, where's everyone dropping dead from all the cell phones or whatever, name your toxin. And like, where's everyone dropping dead? I'm like, well, this stuff takes a long time to manifest, and it's the death by 1,000 cuts. That's the problem with any of these. There's so many, like we asked Steve to pull up that chart about electrification and chronic disease or heart disease.
Yeah.
That's a great chart. It's cool. Like, look, all the cool states in the Northeast, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, they had the highest percentage of electrification, and they had the highest rate of heart disease at that time period. But
this is from so this is
1940.
This is 1 year.
1 year, yeah. So it's just a snapshot in time. So again, but guess what else? New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, maybe they had Crisco and maybe they had other stuff if that was toxic. But it is pretty compelling. And again, it's just another factor to consider in your environment that is foreign and based on the research and our knowledge of how biology works, if you dig deep enough, is toxic or is potentially disruptive. And the thing about like the flu and the solar cycles, like we are so disconnected from our electromagnetic environment.
How is the flu connected to the solar cycles again?
That's just like maybe Steve can look that up too. But apparently what Arthur Furstenberg wrote about was before telecom cables were put underneath or in society in the late 1800s, the flu was more of a uncommon, like it came around for a couple years and then left for like 5-6 years. And it was more tied to the solar cycles, which I wouldn't be surprised with, but you're going to have to try and find some very unbiased information.
Oh yeah, it's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
Well, like
in general,
but in antiquity, people were dying from fucking plagues left and right. Like there was a plague every 5 years.
That's something different. I think it was more so like the annual, like what's known as the common flu, like every winter, not like the bubonic plague or some crazy infectious disease. So that's something different. But
we're doing a lot better than we were back then.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to romanticize the past totally, because people, they were living outside, but they were struggling with infectious diseases. But the thing that the mainstream likes to paint, we're healthier as a society because of lifespan, but they had kids dying when they were 8, and that skews all the
infant
numbers.
Mortality rate was like 50% back then.
Childbirth mortality as well.
Yeah.
And you can look at again, like what is health span versus lifespan? That's like a whole debate.
Well, I think it's always been the same, as far as we know. So
the maximum,
correct.
Yeah.
Obviously, people were dying from hand-to-hand combat, plagues, famine, all that stuff, war. But a healthy individual that didn't get murdered or didn't die from a plague would live the same exact time, same exact lifespan back in, as far as we know, like BC.
Yeah.
Than we do now.
Yeah, and that's where the longevity biohacking community, I'm like, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see, but
Yeah.
I'm focused on.
I always wonder about that guy, the Brian Johnson guy.
I talked to him this past weekend.
Oh, did you
actually.
really?
Yeah, we were at the same like health event in Austin, and I was like, "What are you doing about light and EMFs?" He's like, "I'm pretty cognizant of light. You know, he doesn't go outside very much, or he's in the shade." But he was open to the EMFs. He's like, "We've looked into it, but we're not convinced." I was like, "Well, try it out."
We've looked into it. Oh, he has like a whole team of
Oh,
like
yeah.
people.
Yeah, he does. I think I like his intent. You know, I'm not gonna, talk bad about anyone. Like he's on his own wavelength. If he thinks he's God and like wants to live forever, by all means. At least
time will tell, right?
He's putting money into telling us like which products are maybe more
he's using
toxic.
himself as a science experiment, right?
Yeah, so at least we know what's going on. But my goal is to convince him that sunlight is good for you. Even
He doesn't buy into it.
Not the ultraviolet.
Get him and Jack Cruz into a room.
That will never work. You got to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
But the EMFs he's open to, so I'm going to send him some papers. And it's like, dude, what do you have to lose? Like, you want to live forever? What do you need your Wi-Fi on at night? But he goes to bed like he's committed. So you have to respect that.
Yeah.
But I don't think all these anti-aging experts. I think we know far less than we think we know.
Yeah, I think so too.
About biology especially. And what I am excited about, one of the few things I'm excited about for AI is like, how do you create a tool that can parse? Like there's thousands and thousands of studies on EMFs, let's say. There are, and I can't read all of them. I could post one on Twitter for the next 10 years every single day, and that wouldn't even be all of them, and then you can't find all of them, and then you have to piece it together. So if there was a tool with the proper guidance, I think we could learn so much about how biology is actually functioning. And then if we fund real research, that's what's promising. But we're not even scratching the surface.
Well, that's
evident.
The EMF topic seems like the most damned topic of all of them, because just look at the lobbying in the food industry and then the pharmaceutical industry, now the telecom industry. Like,
and guess what?
How much money, I'd be interested to find this out, Steve. How much money does the telecom industry make compared to the pharmaceutical industry? Like, and how much do they spend on, and we can just do the math on how much lobbying they pay
I got
for.
the lobbying numbers.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah, I have it written down right here.
What is it?
In 2018, for AT&T, was 18.5 million, Verizon 12 million. The CTIA and the NCTA, they're like basically associations that represent the telecom industry. So like vouching for them, fighting for the rights was another like 22 million. That was in 2018. I looked at more recent numbers and it's about like 20 to 50% higher now. So it's a lot. They're probably lobbying like $100 million a year, which is nothing compared to what they make, but it's pretty high.
The global pharma industry is estimated to be worth 1.2 trillion, which will grow to more than 1.5 trillion by 2020. Okay, this is old. By 2021. The pharmaceutical industry generates 550 billion in revenue in 2021. All right. Well, let's look at the telecom industry. Oh, here we go. By comparison, the telecom industry with a global revenue over around 5 trillion is significantly larger than the pharmaceutical industry, which is estimated to be worth 1.2 trillion. Almost 5 times bigger.
It's way bigger.
Wow.
And guess what we said earlier? It's like,
and they're working for the NSA at the same time. So like, we're fucked, dude.
But the thing with the food and the pharmaceuticals, you actually have a choice. Do you really have a choice about your electromagnetic environment right now? Not really.
Less of a choice, right?
Much
because
less.
It's invisible.
It's invisible. Plus, there's no consent to where the infrastructure goes, and we have to use it. You don't have to take medication. You can choose pretty deliberately about your food. Like you could go buy it from a farmer. Right now, there are not really great alternatives for tech. There's literally no alternatives for telecom. We all use Verizon, AT&T. Like it's a monopoly in all facets.
There's no choice. Yeah.
And then if you look at the FCC, if you want to talk about corrupted 3-letter agencies, I mean, they haven't updated their guidelines since 1996. The former like heads of the CTIA and I think the general counsel of Verizon were their last 2 commissioners. I think the guy Trump put in now has he's kind of okay. I've seen him referred to as like the 5G czar in a good way. Like Trump,
who is he?
I don't know. Brendan Carr, I think is his name. I don't know enough about him, but I mean, Trump loves 5G. He's like, we're gonna have the best 5G.
He loves 5G.
Yeah, he just he's a business guy. So he just like
he also loved the warp speed, Operation Warp Speed.
So it's
Brandon Carr is the senior Republican on the Federal Communications Commission, having served. So what's his bent here?
He's like a legal FCC like guy.
Okay,
so
and he's anti 5G.
No, he's pro.
Oh, he's
5G.
pro.
Sorry.
5G.
I shouldn't have said czar. I should have said something else.
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't think we're gonna. I'm curious to see, because guess what? You got Trump, who's like loves 5G and tech and 6G. He just says
6G.
Oh yeah, that's next. Yeah, so
we're gonna have 6G.
It's gonna be so big.
It's gonna be great. Like nothing we've seen before.
We are somewhat behind China in terms of telecommunications, because the rollout for 5G did take a while. So you have those two.
Well, at least we're not installing the Huawei bases all over here anymore.
Yeah, that are just listening to everything. Yeah. So we're smart about that. The U.S. military still buys like Chinese drones, but at least we're getting.
Do they really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That seems silly. There's no way we buy.
Who makes all our
drones? Like not military drones.
No, well, I don't know for sure, but anyway, we make all our products in China, so.
Yeah.
Like these are all made in China.
Yeah, they are.
So we're kind of stuck in that regard. But what I'm saying is we got Trump, who's pro 5G, 6G. We got Elon. Elon, you need to acknowledge that EMFs are potentially harmful for your biology. So that's all I got to say. Because he's been on Rogan and be like, you could put something like 1,000,000 times stronger than your phone up to your head and it wouldn't have any effect. Like he said some stupid stuff. But again,
he also says that there's no evidence for any kind of advanced propulsion systems by any aerospace industries. He doesn't think aliens are interesting. And he thinks that we can go to Mars, even though we haven't been to the moon in 54 years.
Yeah, he's also highly intelligent and highly strategic. So I'm sure he's not just gonna say what actually makes sense.
Highly strategic
for the public.
But like, I don't know. It kind of like, is he that like? But why are you on Twitter all day, every day, just like
I don't know,
posting boring, like not even funny memes?
And then you have RFK. So I'm like, how is this going to play out? I'm very curious to see if there is anything. Maybe they let RFK just do some research funding on EMFs, but this is where consumer demand, like consumer opinion and voicing of concerns is actually what drives change. And I think spreading awareness that this is a real thing. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a real thing. Go look at the studies. Go read some of these books: Invisible Rainbow, Cross Currents, Zapping of America, Microwave Debate. Some of these you can't even find anymore. You have to find the PDF, and they're from 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot. There's a lot of great researchers: Henry Lai, Martin Powell, Robert O. Becker, Alan Frey.
Robert O. Becker was in that book, The Pentagon's Brain. There's a whole fascinating episode on him where he talks about limb. He was the guy who was about limb regeneration, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And that's where he discovered like bone was semiconductive. That's where he discovered that there's little electrical currents that stimulate, cell repair, cell regeneration, limb regeneration. And now they're studying how magnetic fields can alter that as well. And it's highly dependent on the frequency, the intensity, the directionality. So there's so many independent variables there. But yeah, that was 70s maybe when he studied that. So there was so much, like we could have made so much progress, and that all just got shut down. And he was on 60 Minutes. I'm pretty sure Alan Frey went on 60 Minutes. So if you want to dig up some fun archives, there you go.
Tristan, thanks, man. This has been a great podcast. Fucking mind-blowing stuff. Tell people where they can learn more about you and Daylight and everything that you guys are doing. Obviously, I'll put links, but
yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. It's been a fun time. Daylightcomputer.com is our website. You mentioned you're a big fan of the website.
Oh yeah, huge fan of the best website known to mankind ever created.
At Daylight Co is our socials. Personally, I'm at Tristan_health on Instagram and at Bitcoin and _beef on Twitter. That was a book I wrote like
Bitcoin Beef?
Bitcoin and Beef.
Bitcoin and Beef?
It was a book I wrote 4 years ago talking about why decentralization matters. So, and now it's all come true. So it's kind of hilarious.
That's awesome, dude. Well, thanks again. This has been super fun. I'll link everything below. And good night, everyone.